Here's what causes all problems: a thought that is out of harmony with life. Successful people learn how to make their mind work for them. I'm David Nagel, and this is the Successful Mind Podcast. Okay, today I'm coming from an interesting viewpoint. It's quite controversial in a lot of circles right now, and I believe that it has the power to really change everything in the world if we understand that primarily our way of thinking is very much based on the physical world alone. And then as we develop as human beings, we find out that there's things that exist beyond what we can sense with our senses that we didn't know was there. Hence the invention of the telescope and the microscope and ultrasonic hearing and frequencies and that type of thing. With machines, we've learned to measure frequencies of different kinds, temperatures, sounds, stuff like that we can't pick up with our five human senses. And it's fascinating that if you study history, that you see that with every turn of an invention that allowed us to become aware of a world that we assumed we had an idea might exist, but we couldn't prove it, that there was tremendous pushback by the scientific community and the religious community that these things were not true. And then scientifically, we found a way to prove that they were true. So one of the worlds that is debated is what we call the spiritual world. And I think one of the problems that we get into is that it's debated both from the scientific aspect of there's a lot of hard scientists that don't believe in God. They don't believe in a spiritual world. And then you have the religious community, which only believes that their religion is right type of a thing. But if we were to expand that idea and realize that there's nothing outside of the spiritual world, but everything is held in context, and we give things to meaning in context. So if we change the context in which we are observing our own world and begin to, I back up on this just a little bit because just something was dawning on me that I was telling somebody about the other day. We were actually discussing enlightenment. And I was like, one of the so-called properties of enlightenment, if you want to go there, is that it removes the dualistic nature of man, right? So we talked on episode 151 about the dualities and how we deal with time and divine timing and all of that. And if we were to be so-called enlightened, we would know the truth about everything. We also remove the duality of man, but almost in a sense that we're making the duality of man, which is the perception of duality, a wrong thing. And it's not a wrong thing. It's an understanding, but it's not a thing in and of itself. Like I said on 151, there is no just left side to anything. There's no right side to anything. There's no just a good, just a bad. It's all encompassing. So when we get down to trying to understand the world that we live in, we have a much different viewpoint, or we can come from a much different viewpoint and analyze completely differently if we understand that everything is spiritual. Nothing can exist outside of that. Now, why is that important? Because it removes the duality of good and evil as a world in and of itself. So are there evil things that happen in the world? Yes. Are there good things or great things that happen in the world? Yes. Do these things exist in and of themselves, like alone on an island? Like, is there a totality that is just evil? No, there is not. Is there a totality that is just good? No, there is not. There is this dualistic aspect, but it's incorporated within the context of the idea that everything is spiritual. When you bring that idea into anything, you then stop judging, measuring, condemning, deciding, reasoning, rationalizing around the specific thing itself, and you then begin to look at different problems that we have in the world from a totally different perspective. So we have to understand a couple of base points. One of the base points is that the modus of all life is for continued and increasing life. It's never for death, destruction, and disease. A matter of fact, if you come from the aspect that energy just is, it's neither created or destroyed, it just is. It's omnipresent. Everything within energy, so in this case, I'm using energy as a substitute word for spirit, okay? Everything within energy, or we could say the universe, everything within the universe is cyclical. Everything is on cycles. From a scientific perspective, we understand this. We understand that there is a cycle to everything. There is a rhythm to everything. You have night and day. You have the rhythm of like the oceans, and the tide goes in, the tide goes out. You have the rising of the moon, the cycle of every 28 days with the moon, which is interesting because it also follows a woman's menstrual cycle. You have the rhythms of our heartbeat, the rhythms of our brain waves. You have all of these things are cyclical. So you have also the seasons. You have spring, summer, winter, and fall. And they're more extreme in some areas of the world and they're less extreme in others. But we have all these different rhythms. So life itself is a rhythm. Life is consistently moving in and out of form. That is based on a perpetual law of transmutation of energy. Energy is always moving from a non-form, which we would a lot of times is referred to as the spiritual realm or the universal realm or the energy realm, right? Wherever your idea is coming from. And it moves from the no thing into a thing and then back out of the thing again. So if you take like this bottle of soda that I've got sitting here, it's plastic. Its deterioration rate is like extremely slow. But over a period of time, just a long period of time, it will deteriorate. Now you might say, well, this is an artificial substance. Not only the plastic, but the diet soda that's actually in it, it's an artificial substance. Yes and no. If we come from the substance itself and we compare it to something that is naturally grown instead of synthesized out of something that was naturally grown, we would say that this is an artificial substance. But where did it come from? It came from a natural substance. It was just synthesized out of a natural substance. So in the truth of it, it is natural. It's just a product of something that is then changed from one form to another, but then we use the term that it's not natural. And in the case of this, most people would say, well, this is not only is it not natural, but because it's not natural, it's not healthy, and our body doesn't have the ability to process it and all that, which is a completely different argument and topic, which I don't want to get into. But the point is this, is that I'm using this because it's on the table. I could use anything. I could use this plastic over, what do we have over here? We have a remote control, right? So we'll use that and get everybody's mind off of the diet soda because I know how triggering that is for so many people. So we'll use this remote control, which shouldn't trigger anybody. Unless you were beaten with it as a child, then you might have an issue. But if you weren't, then you should be okay. All right, remote control. So this remote control has a deterioration process. If I take it and throw it in the dirt, over a period of time, the natural deterioration is going to reduce this down to the base element in which it came from, which is out of the earth to begin with. That element then becomes part of a natural element, which then regrows into some kind of form of life once again. And then if somebody synthesized that, they could turn it into plastic and the batteries that are in here and make a remote control. So can we say that the remote control is good or bad, or it has a life of its own, or whatever? We can if we're just looking at the truth of this as a remote control. But if we take it out and look at it in the truth of the whole, we understand that basically this remote control lives in a cycle of life. Actually, it probably will only be, as far as its use value, it will only be good until technology changes. So even at that point, it will be useless and disregarded. At that point, before it ever actually breaks down into the natural elements in which it came from. But everything in life is this way. And where I'm going with this, you might be thinking, why the fuck are you talking about a remote control? That's stupid as shit. Yeah, maybe, right? But if we bring it back to the idea that it came from a natural element that's already here, and that never disappears. The remote control may disappear, but the natural element doesn't disappear. Also, if we think about this, in order for this to be born, so to speak, to be created, to be made, to be invented, it had to come from an intention, right? So this didn't just form out of nothing. It wasn't like, boom, here, it's a miracle. Here's this remote control. Somebody had to have an image in their mind, an intention for its use, and then work out how do we actually create something like this. My argument is the human being any different? Like there needed to be, or any life at all. Look at that. Isn't that pretty cool? Look at that. Squirrel, I was just distracted. That's the neat thing about these podcasts. Anything could happen. You never know what's going to happen. It'll be interesting to see, Tuss, on how these morph as time goes on in the new studio. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun. So the idea is this, that the human being is an intention. Now, the argument over the ages is what an intention from what? An intention from a God, an intention from science, and what is the intention of the human being to be developed? It really depends on the perspective or the context in which you present that question or you present that argument. If you believe in a God, that intention is then that God wanted to create something in his likeness based on what we know about Scripture. So then you have the human being. If you base it just strictly on science, then it is basically a morphology of life throughout the ages, which we call evolution. It's constantly evolving into something else. I'm not here to argue that either. What I'm here to talk about is the context in which we look at anything at all. And what was it before what it is now? So is the human being life in and of itself, or did the life exist before the human being, and the human being is just the vessel in which the life resides? That's currently our state of belief and awareness at a higher level right now, that we're actually spiritual beings in a human form, having a human experience. Many people are running around the world and have for a long time seeking a spiritual experience. What they don't understand is that we are actually a spiritual experience already, having a human experience. That's the idea that the body, the person in the body we don't have a soul, we are a soul. Now, if that's true, we are one form of an expression of life. But what's really fascinating about this is that every individual person is having that experience that they call life. And it's individuated by the individual that's having the experience. In other words, my experience of this podcast room right now is my experience. Brandon is in here. Will, our videographer, is in here, filming, recording, engineering, the whole thing. We're all having our own experience. I'm having an experience of watching Brandon take notes. I'm having an experience of Will monitoring all the electrical equipment. They're having an experience of me. They're having an experience of the microphone. They're having an experience of the camera. And when we leave here, we'll all carry our individual experiences away and then begin to experience something else. Now, why is this important? It's important to understand that our experience is not the totality of what's actually happening at the same time. It's just our individual experience. What's happening for you, Brandon, is real. Will, what's happening for you is real. What's happening for me is real, but they're only our own individual experiences. I can't have your experience. I can try to understand your experience if you tell me what it is, but I can't have your experience. That's yours, that you own that. Now, what's interesting about that is by choice and personal responsibility, we can determine what we're going to do with that experience. But if we make the error of taking that experience and just making it our own, as that's all that's real is that experience, we're missing the entire truth. That is not the truth. That is our individual reality of something that we're experiencing. There is a truth in here that even the three of us are not aware of right now. Every person that we could bring into this room would have a completely different experience that we're having based on their perception of reality, based on their perception and their judgment of what's going on or what's not going on, whether the room is decorated to their liking or they think that it's horrific, whatever the topic that we're discussing, how we look, how we smell, how we appear, all of that begins to form a judgment and a mental image and an emotion inside of us as to what that experience is. But it's not the only experience. So my argument for this is that the entire world that we live in is exactly the same way. If we experience something or witnessing something that we call evil, or that we call bad, or that we call poverty, or that we call wealth, or we call illness, or that we call abuse, or that we call a marriage, or that we call a business, whatever it is that we call it, that is our individual experience of the thing, but it does not bring in the entire truth about the thing. It's just our experience. And you might think, okay, I'm following you or not following you, or wherever the listener is right now on this journey that we're taking together, but what is the point? Well, here's the point. That means that there's a lot more truth about what's actually going on than what our experience is. But if we're going to make determinations about everything in our world just based on that experience, we're not getting to the truth. So why? So what is the big why? Like, where are you going with this, David? Well, here's where I'm going with this. The idea is, like, why are we so stuck? Why are there so many people that are broke? Why are there so many people that are starving? Why are there so many people in disease? Why do we have governments that are fighting? Why are we fighting wars with our brother human beings on the planet? Because we're stuck in ideologies based on our experience and belief about what's happening to us individually. We don't really comprehend or understand that we're part of a giant whole, WHOLE, a giant intention that is really for more life. So here's the deal. Life, the only thing that spirit, the universe, energy, whatever you want to call it, the only thing it can do is increase that which it flows through. So energy is flowing through my body. It will, if I'm in a state of disease, it will increase the disease. If I'm in a state of health, it will increase the health. My body's determining what form that energy takes as it flows through me. It also takes the form of the ideas or the images that I hold in my mind, which then move me into action or judgment or evaluation and decision about my life, and then that becomes my life. But what if it's not working? If it's not working, it increases it to the point where it breaks down and no longer sustains life, and then everything is reduced down to its base element again. If you think about a tree, you have a tree. In the springtime, let's do that. In the wintertime, it's dormant. Snow, it's cold, depending on where you are in the world, I get it. The tree's dormant. In the springtime, it starts to come to life. It has more light. It's getting rain, it's getting food, it starts to bud, and it grows leaves, it flowers, it goes into its reproductive cycle, and then in the fall, it starts to go into its dormancy again. It gets colder, days are shorter, the light is more diminished, the leaves start to turn yellow, brown, dead, they fall. When those leaves fall, what was once living is now hitting the earth, and it's decaying, which is turning back into its base element to provide for more life. So it's constantly moving. Now, if you have a tree that's diseased, like say ants infest a tree or something, and it starts to get to the point where it can no longer sustain life, then the universe, by the way that we're designed, by this cyclical pattern, reduces it down to its base form. And then it turns back into life once again. Our ability to choose, our ability to redirect that energy inside of ourselves can take problems and do the same thing with them. Because if we don't understand that the universe will reduce anything back to its base form that is not adding to life, so that it can, because the only thing is life. If we don't understand that, then we will continue to try to fix problems from the idea that the problem stands alone in its own. And that's absolutely not accurate. If we look at it holistically, and we're coming from the place of, okay, so here's this problem, here's this atrocity, whatever it might be, and we say this is not spiritual, it's not God, it's not holistic, it's not the universe. We can't solve the problem based on truth, because we're not seeing truth. We're only seeing what we don't like. So then we say we have to stomp out the thing that we don't like. But we're not coming from the place of what caused it to begin with. And here's what causes all problems: a thought that is out of harmony with life. That's what causes problems. A thought that is out of harmony with life. If we're thinking according to life, we're going to think thoughts that allow us to expand life, that allow us to solve problems and continue to move forward. If we come from the idea that death is a bad thing, we end up trying to prolong the length of life instead of the quality of life, instead of how we live, right? I had, this thing with my back, Tuss, where after 30 years, I figured out a thing that is getting rid of the pain, which we're going to talk about on the Transformation podcast towards the end of the year. So people want to stay tuned for that because it's a fascinating story. But somebody was talking to me about this, and I said, listen, this has been so transformative that if somebody came to me and said, look, what you're doing to get rid of the pain will kill you in 10 years. Would you choose to keep doing it? Or would you let that go and live 20 more years in the amount of pain that you've had for the last 30? I said I would keep doing it and live for 10 years. I would totally make that choice. Because living in that kind of pain is not living, right? What is 10 more years in agony going to bring me? Nothing. It's going to be a miserable extra 10 years just to say what? That I lived, but I'm walking like a fucking question mark through the world. So the idea is like, what do we do to increase the quality of life? The planet can only sustain so much life to begin with. And then it's out of harmony with the idea of life. So its nature will naturally bring down, it will rebalance the planet if it gets out of harmony with itself. And there will be nothing that we can do about it. We run around like crazy trying to fix all these individual problems, but part of the idea is that we're getting out of harmony with the idea of life. And one of the ways that we get out of harmony with that is we start looking at these individual problems and saying, these have to go away because these things are bad. There's more and more, we cure diseases, there's more and more diseases. There's more and more things that affect the physical human being. And we keep talking about, if we do this, we might be able to live forever. If we crack the genetic codes, we might be able to live forever. Where are we going to put all these people? Like, what is the deal? Like, you're going to take up all the space, all the food resources on the planet, unless we figure out how to live on another planet. You're not going to solve the problem. And my guess is that we probably would be overpopulated before we figured out how to find a planet that we could actually sustain a significant population of life on. But it's like you don't ever hear hardly anybody talk about the idea that maybe it's okay that people die. They don't want to talk about that. It seems like an abhorrent conversation, right? Oh, we can't do that. You're like, how cruel can you be? But wait a minute. It's only cruel if we're coming from the place that the length of life itself is more precious than the quality of life. And I would argue that it's not. And here's where I would base my argument from this. And I have said this many times, whenever you want to look for the truth, look to nature, because nature undisrupted by man will tell you the truth all the time. Nature does not tolerate thoughts or things that are happening that are out of harmony with life. It will reduce it back down to its original substance in order for life to continue. If it gets out of balance, it rebalances in some way. So I think that it is an ignorant thing to go to this place where we start picking things apart and saying that they're good or bad, almost as it is something entirely different than being spiritual. And then striving for this thing that's unattainable, which is spirituality. If you understand you are spiritual, you're as spiritual as you're ever going to be. Everybody on the planet right now, I don't care if you're a serial killer, you're as spiritual as you're ever going to be, because you're all of that now. The problem is you're not aware of it. And that is a big difference. It's not something you have to get. You already have it. But you have to become aware that you have it. Like, I use this example frequently too, Tuss. You've heard me talk about swimming is not a learned thing. It's an awareness. If you take a little kid and you make that kid aware that they have the ability to swim, take them out of a pool for 20 years and push them in the water, they're not going to be like, oh shit, I forgot how to swim and drown, because they're aware of how to do that. It's different than like a math problem, right? Like, you don't do algebra for 20 years, you're probably not going to remember how to do it. But if you're not aware that you have the ability to swim and somebody pushes you in the water, there's a good chance you're going to drown, even though it's already in you. So the problem is not that you don't have the ability. You have the ability. You're just not aware that you have the ability. People are spiritual, but if you're not aware of it, then you don't know how to show up in the world. You don't know how to access the resources, the knowledge, the potential of that, because you're just not aware of it. You think you're something else. And that's basically how we raise people. We raise people to believe they're their color, they're their race, they're their gender, they're the environment that they grew up in. And here's a big one, they're their results or lack of results. The world wanted to brand me in the way that they wanted to brand me when I quit high school, and everybody said there's nothing I can do with my life until I went back to school. Well, that's completely not true, but that's what people thought. And then you have people on the other side. They could go and have all the degrees they could possibly ever get, and they're still broke. It's not that is not, an education is not necessarily the thing either way that would make or break a person. Our potential to do anything comes in the awareness that we already have that potential, and we bring it out from within. That's where the word educate comes from. It comes from the Latin word educo, which means to bring forth, or from without, or from within to without. It's already in us. If we start to realize that we are spiritual, that we have all the power in the universe locked up inside of ourselves, we stop looking for an outside fix. And we have to ask the question then, what do I not understand? What is it that I don't understand about myself that has the power to radically change anything that I want to change? What do we not understand about ourselves as a human species that has the radical ability to change the direction of the world? If we start asking that question, we come up with completely different answers, because we stop looking at the problem as a cause in and of itself, and we start looking at it from where did it actually come from. All problems come from a lack of understanding of what we really are and what it is that we're actually doing and what we have the potential to do. But if we're just going to focus on a problem because we're angry or we're hurt or we're rejected or we're scared, we're never going to get out of our own way. We will completely stay stuck. So here's the challenge for everybody that's listening to this. Start to think, when you think, start to think from this place. Everything is spiritual. The worst things in the world that you experience are spiritual. The best things in the world are spiritual. And if you really stick with that idea, you'll find that you start to come up with different solutions for different things than you would if you just label one thing as bad and one thing as good. Because when we label something bad, what are our resources at that point? We want to go take the known thing that's good and cover the bad with it to eradicate the bad to make it good. But the only reason we do that is because we only know that this is good, because we've labeled it as that. Now, here's why we're in wars. One country thinks the thing that they believe in is good, and we think it's bad. We think what we believe in is good, and they think it's bad, right? That's just perception. So we're fighting over to have our perceptions actualized, and recognized, validated. But they're not valid. They're just perceptions. That's all that it is. And when you come from that place, all you end up doing is manipulating, and we don't actually come together because we can't let go of the idea that I'm right and you're wrong. You're wrong and that I'm right. And that's a constant battle. But if we come from the place that everything is spiritual, everything should move toward more life, then the decisions start to become very clear. The answers start to become very clear. The universe doesn't hide anything from us. Our own ignorance hides things from us. So start thinking that the idea that if everything is spiritual, then everything must be for the movement toward life. But you also have to expand your definition of life to realize it's not just in the living thing. It's not just in the person. It's not just in the oak tree. It's not just in the salmon. Life is something that's eternal, that is constantly flowing with and through the physical thing to give it expression. That's what it is. All right. Have a good day. That's something to chew on. Thanks for listening to the Successful Mind podcast. And if you like what you heard and you want to know more, go to davidnagel.com/free stuff.